So guys, I'll give you a small little formal introduction to Hirenbai. Hirenbai is the promoter of a company called Prime Fresh. It is mainly into the agro processing space with a lot of value addition. He's been in this domain for a large number of years. He's grown up from thinking of an idea to getting listed on the stock exchange, and then then conducting business. Unlike other startups, this is a very profitable business that Hirenbai runs. And second, it is not a business that he runs really sitting in an air conditioned cabin. You have fleet on street. You have people present at appropriate locations. You have people that really that he has the connect with the farmer. And I think Hirenbai's company is a company that we should all look forward in the next 5 to 7 years to grow and become a unicorn. So I think very much on that trajectory. Over to you, Hirenbai. We would love to hear from your journey from the day you decided you want to do something and how you got here. And I'll keep asking you questions in the middle.
Okay, so the idea of Prime Fresh. Let me just give the rest of the team members the brief of the Prime Fresh, what we do first, and then I tell you how we started. So, okay, Prime Fresh is basically into fruit vegetable supply chain business. We have two segments of business. One is a pure service business, wherein we manage third-party warehouses, cold storages, packing centers. We provide facility management. We provide sorting, grading of fruits, vegetables, barcoding. We provide these services to Reliance Fresh, Wag Bakri Tea, Amazon, various other large players into exports, into domestic retailing, etc. Now, this business naturally gives us access to the huge volume and a large scale, business execution with big players of India. The second business, which is a core business for us, is mainly into fruit vegetable supply chain business. This is where we have been spending a lot of time, efforts, money. This is where we have been growing, and this is what we want to grow to a very large scale. Now, what exactly it is? So it starts from naturally field visits, meeting a lot of farmers, a lot of local area aggregators, visiting local mandis, traveling to contract farmer groups, traveling to destinations where certain particular agri commodity like pomegranate, mango, these products are grown in a big way in these areas. So we go and tie up with farmer groups. We go and tie up with the local ecosystem. We educate them. We spend time with them on the farming practices, the global acceptable standards, how to produce export quality products, how to do grading, sorting, etc. Also, it also involves a lot of value addition on the saving of resources like water. For example, you may be using drip irrigation, but when you put your drip irrigation line in a particular distance with the tree or the plant, then you need less water. Similarly, there is something called pruning of plants. So the timing of the pruning of plants, timing of certain plugging of unproductive fruits. Or there are many such value additions we do to farmers. So okay, it starts from visiting base, building, educating them, repeatedly visiting their farm, offering them free services of helping them produce more, doing the proper registration of them, regularly uploading the video of these farms to my procurement team. So that is a field visiting which does all this. Thereafter, what happens is that there is a harvesting schedule which is being prepared. There is a proper data analytics. That these data are also being connected with the marketplaces. The market demand is being evaluated, and based on the market demand, there is a final harvesting schedule which is being prepared. So this is purely a procurement work which we do. Of course, post procurement there is a sorting, grading, packing, various other activities takes place, and finally there is a logistics. So right from post harvesting, the handling to last mile, reach of that input, that material is what we do. Now, when we buy this material, we buy from, as I said, farmer or farmer groups or lease farming, contract farming, local APMCs. When we sell this, we sell to a couple of segments: food processing companies, modern trade, We sell it to exporters. We sell to global buyers. We also tie up with local mandis in different destinations. For example, pomegranate is grown in a big way in Maharashtra, Rajasthan, and Gujarat, but there is a lot of consumption in North and Northeast. So we travel there, we create markets, we build markets, we make them understand the value of the product grown in these areas. We ensure that the material is harvested and packed according to those markets requirements. That is, we ensure that within a particular time frame, material reaches from those farms in Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Gujarat to north and northeast, whether it is the Bihar, Patna, Kolkata, Siliguri, Jammu, various areas. So this is broadly a fruit vegetable sourcing and distribution. This is what we are into. Now coming back to your question, how we started this journey. So okay, my elder brother was working with Subiksha Retail way back in 2007. His prior experience was into sales, distribution, channel management with Marico Industries, Garnier Laboratories, very large company. And when he was working with Subiksha, he was additionally provided, a chance to handle the fruit vegetable vertical for Subiksha. And he realized that there is a lot of gap in the system in terms of the quality of material, the grading practices, a better remuneration to be paid to farmers, certain outdated practices followed at APMCs, and also the lack of proper training to the entire people involved in the supply chain of the fruit vegetables, right from harvesting till the last mile. So he felt that there is a huge opportunity in fruit vegetable business, and he came to me and he said that let's start something initially with B2C, where we will tie up with corporates and household and will supply fruit vegetables. That's how the idea germinated, and it was purely friendly family decision and liking a concept that there is value adding to society, there is a value addition to farmers, and consumers were not getting good quality, good packing, right? So I said it's a fantastic idea, go ahead. So there was no intention of making money from at my end. It was a purely a social friendly family decision, and he said that let's do something. I said fine, go ahead, I'm there to support. So this is how we set up the company, Prime Customer Services Private Limited, in 2007 April. Later we converted into a limited company with friends, family, and some other, market friends like you who put some, and we could raise some small capital as an outside capital also, and we kept on building. So initially we started with 6 lakh, and then gradually kept on adding money. Over the years so far, we have put in about 15 crore gradually through internal approval, equity, etc. Last year, our top line was 50 crore. This year, we are aspiring for 70 crore. The next 3 years, we believe that we have all the ingredients in place to reach 300 crore turnover. As we speak, I would like to explain a little more about Prime. What Prime is, we have got network of more than 30,000 farmers across 45 districts of, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, and Gujarat. We have more than 650 local area aggregators who in turn work hard, and we support them by advances, we support them by buying, we support them by education, setting up collection centers, etc. We have built about 600 local clients in Ahmedabad where we have APMC license. We have about 350 aggregator trader clients across country. We have about 52 APMCs tied that up. Most of these modern trade guys, e-commerce guys are our client, with a big basket, Amazon, Reliance Retail, Aditya Birla More. We deal with them. We understand their requirements. We understand the packing. We understand their different parameters of supply chain, and we service them. So this is what broadly we do at Prime. Now coming back to how we started. So initially when we started, as I said, as a B2C company, we realized within 6 months that probably we were early in the game. The market was not matured and not ready to accept quality and service and pay a little higher price for better quality and service of fruits and vegetables. So we quickly decided to tie up with various corporates, and we become a service provider and supplier to these corporates. What happens is that when any unorganized business like agriculture and particularly fruit vegetable, which is very fragmented, where there is no standard, right? There is no grading, packing, MRP. It is very difficult for a small startup to, change the system and create a new ecosystem and invest a lot in people, processes, infrastructure. So it is better to at times tie up with large corporates and become a service provider and supply to them, learn with them, and slowly and steadily build a model where you have a decent cash flow coming in. You also learn the art of controlling costs, etc. I think this is a very important lesson for all my fellow friends who are entrepreneurs, that it is very important to have a right model, and it is very important to figure out at an early stage what is fault with your model, and if it is not generating a reasonable cash flow, then probably you need to tweak it, and you need to stay focused on your fundamental concept. And there was a fundamental value and opportunity in the idea of fruit vegetable, but you need to tweak it with the market realities, and accept certain basic facts, and delay the original idea of execution, and stay in the game, and tie it with big players, and learn with them. So this is one important thing which we quickly did. The second, as we were managing their distribution centers, packing centers, collection centers for them, we realized that ultimately it is very important to be a part of the APMC system, because APMC was still 95% of business, 97% of business those days. Today, still it is around 85, 88% of the business. Uh, we took a APMC license. So we accepted the change that the distribution will not be possible only by local system, or tying up with modern trade or corporate, but we also need our own presence in APMC, and improve the practices at APMC. Okay, so let's say you don't simply straight away challenge the existing ecosystem, but probably try to be there, and improve the practices followed. So let's say the transparency of selling material which farmer is sending to APMC, giving quick payment, okay, helping them to send certain graded material. If they have not been able to bring the graded material, you help them when the material is arrived at your destination. You grade the material into ABC so that they get a better price for their A material. Another thing, you teach them the practices of those days. For example, not accepting cash. Okay, do the proper registration, and follow banking policy, banking system. So also help them to build a farm which is more quality focused. Okay, which is more focused on what market loves to, like market like size, market like consistency of shape, color, etc. Right. Similarly, there are other practices like when you load a material, you have to be very particular. When you unload it, so you keep training your farmers who are coming to APMC. You keep servicing them in a better way than your existing APMC guys are. So this is another thing we did. After some point of time, we realized that it is very important to have a cold storage, the ripening unit. So we added that also. And we kept on improving and evolving the business model as and when required. So we, as I said, from B2C to corporate service provider supplier to APMC to cold storage setup. And then probably we realized that Maharashtra is the biggest producer of fruits and vegetables, and it is extremely important to me having presence in Maharashtra, because Maharashtra is almost kind of a feeder to the nation when it comes to onion, orange, when it comes to pomegranate, many other fruits and vegetables. Even green chili, drumstick, many products are grown in a big way in Maharashtra. And Bombay has a port and airport, and it is very feasible to export from Bombay. So we immediately thought an idea in 2013-14 that let's build a Maharashtra team, and we kept on adding to Maharashtra team. Today we have a 14 people core team, and we outsource almost around the year 200 people in Maharashtra for procurement, harvesting, distribution, packing, etc. As we speak, there is a big orange operation going on at Amravati, Varud, Nagpur, those areas. And we are providing daily employment to 50 people. And this operation could continue till March. And only 9 people from our team are working there. So what I'm saying, you have to be open to changes. You have to be open to learn what is going on around. You have to kind of pay attention to it, and you have to tweak the resource allocation strategy. So whether people allocation, money allocation, whether doing field research, etc. Instead of Gujarat or Rajasthan, we spend more time in Maharashtra these days. So, so this is what it is. So as we speak today in our company, we have more than 300 people full time working. Around the year, we outsource more than 1,000 people for employment of these activities. We handle about 12,000 tons of material last year. Our aspiration is to handle and sell at least 35,000 tons of material in the next 3 years. Our current procurement bandwidth is 1 lakh ton per annum, which is growing at a double every 3 years. So we are very focused on some of the fruit vegetable like pomegranate, orange, grapes, tomato, onion, and also we are gradually adding one or two category every year. Right. And this is a brief about Prime and little journey about how we started.
Sure, sure. So, Hiren bhai, tell me. So, in your journey from 2007 till 20, it's been
Yeah,
13 long years. What are the
yeah,
major challenges that you've really felt, and how have you
yeah.
overcome that? The major challenges. That is, that's a learning for a lot of these startups that are really. What are the major challenges you faced?
Sure. I think the biggest challenge is people because agri is people dependent, right? And since it is not organized yet fully, so you don't get that people who are well presentable, documenting all that. So I think at every stage, what we had to do is that the promoter and the core team had to learn and document ourselves the SOP for everything. So whether orange operation or a pomegranate operation, every operation or farmer registration or farm evaluation. So we kept on spending time, days and nights, documenting our learnings, building our own processes, and spending time with the team and educating them. Also, you have to keep meeting a lot of people and request for references because again accountability levels are very low in this trade. Particularly, people are not very well educated or not worked in a proper corporate culture, etc. So creating a corporate in this space was a big challenge. And I think we have been trying to do that. So we have our own induction training program. We have our own warehouse management program. We have our farmer registration program, farmer talking program. So we have internally developed about 12, 14 processes, and that's how we are addressing these people related challenges. This is a major challenge we face. The second, naturally, everybody would face is logistics again, because goods have to be transferred, right? So and trucks are not easily available. There is no standard way of or the list of people, list of truckers or where there is a route planning and everything has to be done, right? So this was another problem, and again with the experience and documenting your experience, you only keep improving. So that's how we have addressed this challenge.
Okay, that's nice to hear that. What about a lot of startups? We've had a lot of deliberation with these startups. There are two ways of doing business in India. One is the valuation game, where you keep losing money, and you keep increasing in value. And second is, the banya buddhi of doing business, where you actually are profitable. You belong to
Right.
probably a profitable business. So how
Yes.
do you choose that boat of profitability rather than just valuation? And how do you really feel being a profitable company rather just being a top line, heavy company?
Right. So I think it has to do a lot with your internal belief system, right? And it has to do a lot with your value for money, right? And those days when we started, the culture of unlimited money was not there, right?
Okay.
Also, most of the startups who come from a right network and the right education background, right your own background, could easily raise money with the concept. And mostly money was available to technology or a pharma or high margin business. What we technically do is a social entrepreneurship, honestly, right? So we are a social enterprise, right? In the process, over the time, we are ensuring that okay, we'll have a reasonable return on investment, and we'll keep building it and make it self-sustainable, and maybe some social impact fund will invest. So I think, as I said, it is a lot to do internal value systems, your belief system that finally you have to be, generating reasonable cash flow. Then only you can survive. And I think I am not, believing that this valuation game and all is sustainable. If you see, 94% of the startup have failed in India, right? If you look at last 20 years history. So even when we started Food Vegetable Enterprise, you know, I can't count even three more names from Prime who started in 2007 and 13 who are still alive. So there will be a handful of five or seven companies in India who survived and who could raise money, during last 7 8 years. Okay, if you started business in 7 or 8 or 9 or 13, and you could still survive with either losses or profits by raising money, I think it has not happened. So far, I believe that thought process was right. That grow slow, sweat yourself very hard, and keep your corporate overheads under control, and don't spend unnecessarily on technology or something which you cannot afford. It's good to spend on technology, but if you can't afford, you should not. Instead, he kept on investing in people. So I believe we are still investing in people every year. So every year we recruit 8, 10 new people. We train them. We keep them on a bench. We give them a lot of time. We make them accountable, responsible, and performable. And next year we expect the results of that. So I believe investing in people is a very important lesson for us and for most of the startups, because it's finally people who make or break.
Absolutely. But, Iran bhai, there are a number of startups here that are also Section 8, that they are a lot of social enterprises. You mentioned that
Yeah.
one of the, when you started off, the aim was to, the development of the ecosystem, that, development of the farmer. So why did you not register as a Section 8? How did you come for profit? I mean, what was the thinking process? Because I'm sure a lot of people, want to structure a business in some part, they want to keep in Section 8, some part they want to, keep it in a for profit. What was your thought process when you started it, that I don't want to do a Section 24, Section 8, now Section 8, and I want to do a regular company? What was your thought process then?
Right. So honestly, when we did a back of the envelope calculation, and when we thought of B2C business, and when we thought of export business of food business, we thought that it could be reasonably profitable and it could grow. And those days there was a little less awareness about Section 8 and other things. So we thought that we could create an enterprise which could do a decent return on investment, and eventually we could raise bigger sum to scale it up. We also thought that food processing would be a next opportunity for us, the forward integration. And we were very confident that these businesses can on the longer term generate 15 to 18% post-tax return. And we thought that as we grow, you take the help of the local area system. I think a lot of people are willing to work, without expectation. So they also feel that if you are doing good for their area, if the farmers are happy, if the local people get employment, you could keep growing. But over the years, as we did the business, we realized that certain segment of business, like storage business, infrastructure business, farmer education, and then harvesting to selling, has a higher cost versus ROI, and you have to compromise, or you have to initially sacrifice as a promoter, and you have to earn less for yourself. For example, if I would have been earning Y amount as a employee in some corporate, maybe I choose to work at a 10% of that, and in return that money was being used for building the business and building the farmers and building the employees. So I think it just happened. There was not big calculation behind it, but we initially felt that it could be a great business, and there are very few organized players, and maybe at some point of time, right set of investors would put in big money. Yeah.
Okay, that comes to a very important point. You mentioned twice cash flow is very important. So I mean, let's put it profitability versus cash flow. In all these years, how have you juggled the two around, and how do you still do it? I mean,
Right.
what's your take for all the
So
entrepreneurs?
in initial years, there was negative cash flow, and there was a sustained investment which was required every year, and yeah, many times this investment was unplanned, and we never thought that we'll need more money. Like when we set up a cold storage in 2011-12, uh, the value of the cold storage was 7 times our net worth, and our own money was hardly 15% of that investment. And then we realized that the asset is not fully utilized because of unhealthy practices by unorganized players, and we had to borrow, or we had to put our own resources, our own house or office as a mortgage, and take a soft loan from the bank, and then run the facility and make it viable. So I still believe that on a longer term basis, very few businesses can survive without having adequate cash flow, and one must ensure that your entire model, generates a decent cash flow. So I belong to that philosophy that most of businesses have to be profitable.
Right. Okay, and you mentioned that you have to mortgage your own house, offices, and all of that. So a
Yeah.
lot of entrepreneurs here, are saying that, listen, do we have to be all in? I mean, do we do it 100%, or can we say, okay, theek hai, chala to chala, nahi to we'll go back to something. To success, what is it? Is it all in and then you take a punt, or how did you do it? I mean, how has been your experience in your journey? I mean,
If you are very convinced about your idea, right, and if you believe that I have got a proper understanding, knowledge, and patience, and at some point of time I will have more people joining me because of my performance and the processes and the network which I built in my organization, then you take that risk. It's all up to your risk appetite, right? But looking at today's business environment, what has happened in the last 5 7 years, I believe that starting a business should have many considerations, and you need a very good team before you start a business. So, for example, in our case, when we started a business, we had only 2 or 3 people. Today, you can't do a business without 6 or 7 core members, in my opinion. Okay,
right,
however, is a good idea, but if you simplify the compartments of the business, you need a 6 7 internal people, like two or maybe 2 3 family members to run a business, because
right,
though they will understand and they will have patience, and also you need to focus, right? So if my strength is finance or a strategy or a evaluation or a business analytics, I should focus that on my each part of business. So for example, why onion business to be done, with whom business to be done, at what terms to be done, you have to go deep into each and every topic of it, right? So business is not so simple. So similarly, if there is a marketing, then you need someone who has a marketing experience, or a that kind of flair for marketing. So I believe that today I would not recommend most of the people to take a risk like what we did, because the environment is very different, and waiting period for most businesses has gone up substantially. I'm saying most businesses. There could be few businesses, niche areas, or some experience-based, product-based opportunities. But generally, most businesses which used to take, let's say, 1,000 days or 1,100 days to break even and stabilize, let's say, way back in 2002 to 2007. Today, most businesses are taking anywhere between 2,000 to 2,500 days. Okay, to be really, on a self-sustainable mode. Now, that requires a huge time and huge money. So, I would say that to start a business, apart from a good idea, okay, you need a good team. So, I think a good idea and a good team, if it is well marketed and supported by some risk takers, that's the right way to jump into the entrepreneurship,
okay,
because you can't have so much of a risk and perform. Okay, somewhere it may impact your energy level and performance level. So I think it should be a risk sharing, a collaboration. Okay,
yes,
so many businesses today have huge potential for a collaboration. So, for example, in our business also, there are good packers who are very good at only packing. So they understand what is packing for UK, what is packing for Netherlands, what is packing for Dubai, and they don't know anything else. So these kind of players, we go and tell them, you focus on packing. I will focus on sourcing and marketing. Okay, and we both grow. So similarly, there are very good guys who are very good at organic only. So I feel that everybody must identify collaboration opportunity. In every business, there is a collaboration. So there can be shared infrastructure, there can be shared resources, and allocation of work, and you can minimize the risk and minimize the outflow. So this is what my suggestion
right.
would be
That's
to
great.
most of them.
Irma, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned that you have a lot of large clients that really do work for. How difficult, because we have a lot of startups here that have great novel ideas and they want that break as far as the large client is concerned, but something or another it's not. How easy is it to break into these large clients? How difficult is it? How did you do it, and what's your advice to them for these larger clients? You mentioned the larger big chains that are really there. So
So
how?
my experience is that spend more
Hello.
time in understanding. So my experience is that first step I'm saying, spend a lot of time understanding them, understanding their processes, their protocol. Okay, and figure out where you can add value to them and win their confidence by identifying those gaps. Okay. Second, keep a lot of patience. You have to keep a lot of patience. For example, Amazon for us, it took 1.5 years. 1.5 years to start business with Amazon.
Okay.
So sometimes their plans are delayed. Sometimes their people are not available. Sometimes what happened to, for example, Corona thing, and they did not launch, right? Sometimes they would want multiple certificates and processes and documentation. The agreements are very long, right? The terms are very strict. So you have to keep lots of patience, and you have to keep meeting their team at various levels, and make them feel that you are really serious about the business. Make them feel that you are not a me too guy. You want to really create value, and you are there for long term, and you are not focusing only on margin but a relationship. So it's yeah, it requires a lot of patience. Yeah,
Okay. Hiren, you started.
continuous dialogue.
Right, perfect. You started off in about 2007. So I think you've seen all the major events that have really happened. You've seen
Yeah,
the 2008 crash. You've
yeah,
probably seen the demonetization. You've seen the
yeah.
GST implementation. You've seen COVID. How have you lived through all of this again and again and again? And what makes you stronger? And what's your message to all these young entrepreneurs here that probably are just going through Corona and saying that, oh God, how do I survive? I mean, you've gone through it all. So,
One thing I say that every time we go through any experience, any setback, or any even meeting, I think I love to document the learning. So what we have done is every time, we have documented and we have deliberated and discussed and created a process or a SOP outcome state. I think that is the first thing I believe. Secondly, when you are not prepared for many uncertainties, like for example GST, your demonetization, our business fell 50% in 5 months. Even in Corona, COVID, our business fell 70% in the next month because your logistics, labor issues, uh, the APMCs were closed, exports were stuck, food processing units were not running. These are the major buyers for us. I would say that always ensure that your business has at least 3 to 5 months of expenses separately lying in your bank account. Because every such crisis are going to last between 3 to 5 months in my opinion. And that 3 to 5 months you have to survive and you have to be there. And during that time you have to improve and document and, as I said, learn and go and meet your suppliers, buyers, be honest, be straightforward, transparent, share learnings, share problems, and wait for time to stabilize. So I think time only heals. My experience is time only a little bit of a preparedness in terms of, as I said, we always had more people. So I have always believed. I learned from Infosys. When I used to read about Infosys in 2000, 2001, 2003, I figured out that this company always keeps people on the bench. They always want to have a good pool of people, keep training people, and prepare for the eventuality. So when you have more resources in terms of people, your ability to manage this kind of crisis and allocate your time to the next set of unwanted or unplanned priorities, you can switch there, and these people can switch to what you are doing. So because finally people drive, people take decisions. So never underestimate the power of people.
that's a great thing. Tell me, Hiren Bhai, now a lot of young entrepreneurs here have one distinction problem that we are working day and night in a company 24 hours. We are drawing no salary, we are taking no money, but we are paying others. Should I take money from the company, or should I just show it as payable when able, and when someday someone comes, I'll take the money, or should I keep drawing? What is your view, and what is your experience? I mean, through the complete process, because as an individual and as a company, they're two distinct things. I mean, that kind of.
So I think it depends on every individual, right? How strong you are as a person, how strong your finances are, how open your family members are to your financial decisions. Like in my case, most of the time I was solo, right? So touchwood, I had an opportunity to marry late, and I was a risk taker, and I could afford not to draw salary for many years, and because I had my own savings, or I had my own other activities, investment, research, etc. So I felt that I don't want to burden the company, and I did not.
Okay.
But I honestly feel after so many years of experience, the driver, the leader, the founder uh, has always to be in a very strong and confident position. Okay, and he has to be feeling very comfortable, secure, and safe, because that will increase his productivity, his performance. Okay, his focus will remain intact, and he will not get digressed. So, in my opinion, after so many years of experience, I think founder, the promoter, director must withdraw every month his basic expense if he doesn't want to burden the company or investors. But he should not reduce or gallop his own savings. Reason being, uh, uh, it will ensure that you don't have a slightest of a thought. Okay, a point never comes where you get diverted to some other line of thought. So I think it's good to lose money for 2 3 years by withdrawing your own expenses. Nothing wrong. It's fine. I mean, investor also understand that any businesses will not become profitable in the first 3 years in today's environment. So it's fine. I think you should withdraw. My conclusion is you should withdraw.
Okay. Okay. So when you started your company, did you feel like giving it up and saying, "Hey, boss, it's not happening. Let me just shut this and go back to what I was doing, or let me start something"? Did you get that thought? How many times did you get it? And how did you overcome that? Because a lot of these startups, you get that thought very often that, that, okay, I've tried, boss, nahi ho raha hai. Now let me just junk this and do something else. How do you motivate yourself? How did you do it in your journey?
Many times. So many times I felt that we are running a social enterprise. Still today, 97% of our revenue is distributed. So whatever comes in the bank account, distributed 97% today also. Right? So we work at a very low margin. But I think we are creating a model now that it will generate a very good ROI. You'll have a very high capital velocity, even if you earn low margin, but your return on equity is very good. Leave apart. So what happens when you feel like that? Okay, let me give it up because I have got many other opportunities and I can earn so well somewhere else without taking risk. Uh, you immediately think also the other side that what is the benefit you are giving to people with you by continuing the enterprise. Okay, so when you run an enterprise, you create value for so many people, so many stakeholders, right? You generate employment. Like we pay a monthly salary of close to 40 lakh rupees, right? Uh, and it's not a small number considering our current size and all. And as I said, we give another 1,000 days of employment to so many other people. So one is naturally you are creating value other than profits. That you need to understand. Second, you have to believe that probably the idea which you are following has kind of a delayed or maybe a time is going to come for it. You have to be internally convinced that okay, there is going to be a time for this idea, and one day it will be workable. So that it's a trade-off. It's an arbitrage. So, but also I would say that you should also go to right consultant, friends, openly discuss, and have a realistic opinion rather than only emotional decision about it. So there could be times where some of the decisions in business or even continuing the business would have been an emotional decision that how can I shut it down? Okay, when I started and when I had this view, but market realities are different. Today, world has changed a lot in the last 10, 12 years and will further change in the next 10 years. So nothing wrong in taking the opinion of people you respect. You should always have a gurus in every walk of life. You should keep making new gurus, and these gurus you can consult, discuss, and you should be open to listening them and take a more pragmatic call. So about myself, when I motivated myself, I always thought, okay, what business we are running, we are creating a huge value for the society. So just for one single reason, I could continue the business. That okay, we are creating value for the society, value for the farmer. Someday, somewhere, this will turn out to be big. And don't think of yourself. Keep your requirement minimal. Keep your corporate overhead minimal, and keep on reinvesting your resources in strengthening the business model. So that's how we continued it.
Okay.
And maybe I was lucky that I had good friends like you in the financial market. who trusted me and who trusted our intent. Okay, I think I would like to touch upon this intent point also. I think you have to be very, very pure at your intent. You have to be very clear. And I think what pays over the long term is your integrity, your intention, and your vision. And people believe in that even if you're losing money. Okay, even if you had a bad time. So you don't leave that. Don't, values both protect करते हैं मुझे लगता है. So we kept on getting money time to time, even our working capital cycle was bad or our asset investment decisions were not paying off. So I think relationship helps. So good relationship with some people help. So I think keep building good relationships, keep meeting good people, have good company. Some basics which has worked. I think.
That's great, Hirenbhai. This module that we are doing for the startups is demystifying finance. You come from a finance background. Tell me, how important is it for a promoter to know finance when he's starting up? Because a lot of people are from various, either from marketing, either from operations. How important is it to know about finance?
Extremely important.
From a finance domain.
I think I would give any entrepreneur, any business idea, green signal only if it is financially viable. Okay, let it be on a piece of paper. It is generating 4% ROI only, no problem. But if it is financially not viable, you should not do it. And financially viability is understood by cost. So I tell always my team, my partners, my co-founders that understanding of cost is very important. Spend a lot of time understanding cost, future cost, today's cost, because cost helps you price the product. And if you price the product properly, you make the profit. And if you know the pricing band, you know the required volume band. So cost understanding is very important, which will give you understanding of price. Price understanding will give you importance of volume. I think to simplify understanding for every entrepreneur, there are three things in business: the cost, the price, and volume. You do everything every day which cuts your cost, which increases your price, which increases your volume. You have to spend at least half an hour a day in the early stage of your business. What will help me achieve this thing in my business? I think 90% of the problem can be handled. Because when you keep doing this deliberation, you will keep coming across ideas, problems, priorities, and to-do lists. Correct? So you will be able to allocate to your team that, okay, focus on this area. Okay, let's focus on how to cut this cost. Let's focus on how to build volume. Okay, let's focus how we can price our product or services better. I think I would say finance is a lifeblood. It's the heart. It's everything. Because paisa hai to sab chalega. You have to pay every day, everyone. Right? Pani ka bhi paisa lagta hai. So naturally, you have to value money. You have to learn money. And every entrepreneur, if he's coming from a technology background or a marketing background, he must do a 2 or 3 weeks or a 2 or 3 months, depending on time available, a crash course.
Are you there, Hirenbhai?
Yeah, I am there. Am I audible?
Yeah. Now you're.
I was saying that every entrepreneur must do 2 to 3 weeks or a 2 to 3 months crash course on finance before starting a business.
Right.
Or side by side, every day you spend 2 hours a day on only finance.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, that will strengthen your understanding of business.
Okay. On finance, tell me, Hirenbhai, your fundraising. A lot of startups think that I have a great idea. I'll meet 3 investors, and third one will give me paisa, and I'll be done. How difficult is it? How much patience do you need? How persistent, and what motivates you to meet people after people after people to raise money?
Right. So, okay. Even in spite of being profitable and building this company over the last 5-7 years in a much better way, I met at least 200 investors in the last 2 years. First of all, okay. So you have to accept that you have to keep meeting people, and you have to be like a child every day, and you have to be optimistic and positive. And every thought, that rehearsal you have to do it from zero and from scratch, and keep a lot of patience because you don't know who will believe in you when. But while meeting everyone has some idea or suggestion for you. And I have realized that everybody could end up giving some idea or thought or a network to me, which could help me to improve my business. So when I go and meet investors, I don't go meet only for raising money, because these investors would be meeting hundreds of people, entrepreneurs like me, and they have a lot to offer. They have a lot of ideas and understanding. Just because they may not like my idea or they may not invest in my company, yeah, I don't forget them. I still remain in touch with them and I learn from them. And uh, so I would say keep a lot of patience. You never know what will keep when. If you believe in your idea, if you believe that you need more fund to grow it, keep meeting. It's a exercise. You can do it in a reasonable time. You allocate some part of your bandwidth to that.
Okay, okay, that's great. Also, now a specific question on the business model. What are your views on the on your questions in the middle? So there were two questions. Two questions. One is on the FPO. I think that you answered. Second was on on COVID. That how did it impact your business, and what is the use of technology that you've done? Related to that is a question that are you using any artificial intelligence or any such tools in your business on the agri side of it to predict demand, predict supply? Are you using any of this kind of technology that is really there? So these were the set of questions that was related.
So I was explaining that we use our internal application which we have built, which connects farmers, which connects our team. That application can record farmer data. That application can do report farm evaluation, farm valuation. The application can also be used for preparing certain basic documents like goods receipt note, delivery challenge. So we were already preparing this application prior to COVID also. Now with the use of that, our connectivity with our field team and our operation team at the back end, at the admin level and the management level has improved.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah. Trying to use multiple simple Google Forms. Okay. And these Google Forms people can use and report and update. As regards to quality inspection, we are tying up with local area agencies or local area experts, because quality inspection has to be done at the farm level, at the pack house level. Okay. With respect to facilities, we have to tie up with third-party facilities, which we are. Two major problems still are unaddressed, which is availability of labor, grader, packers, and vehicles. So again, you need to put separate team who will keep on meeting such third-party resources, and we are doing registration of these people in our system. Otherwise, post-COVID, cost of transport has gone up, labor cost has gone up. Otherwise, execution is not a problem, but we are seeing some sort of a fall in demand for fruits. People are probably spending more on vegetables versus fruits. People can kind of postpone fruit consumption, but can't postpone vegetable consumption. So to create demand, we need to travel a lot and create new destinations. So we are adding more people in the system, and we are trying to reach out to new markets. Like as I said, Bihar, Kolkata, Odisha, West Bengal and all. So we are trying to travel more. And overall impact is that our travel cost has gone up, labor cost has gone up, and transportation cost has gone up.
Also, Hirenbhai, there are two related questions again. That you work very closely with the farmer, and it's very difficult to associate with the farmer when you don't belong to that geography. So how have you done that successfully to gain the farmer's trust to start with when you started off? Now it's a different thing. Now you're a known name. Now people know you. So how did you do that? And also a part of a similar question is how long does it really take for any company to become profitable, and how long did it take for you to become profitable, and after how many years did you do your first fundraise outside the family? So both these things, if you can address.
Right. So outside the family, the first fundraising was in 2017.
10 years, almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. And when were you profitable, Hirenbhai? When was the company profitable? In how many years was it profitable?
So okay, we were making marginal profits. So okay, in profit for me, the definition is ROE, right? cost of fund. So if my cost of fund is, let's say, 14%, if I am earning 5%, I'm a loss-making company technically. So
Correct.
for us, the definition of profit and loss is with respect to the ROE,
Okay.
right? So we were making small profit from year one only.
Okay.
But these profits, let's say, even if you have made a 1 lakh profit in the first year, and you have left a job of 35 lakh rupees salary per annum, it's a 34 lakhs loss, right?
Correct. Notional
so,
loss. Yeah.
so the definition of loss also need to be defined by entrepreneurs. He needs to understand that loss is not what it looks on the balance sheet. There could be other considerations. Or
Right.
profit, what looks like may not be a profit. It's actually a loss, or it's actually a very low profit. So I think you need to have your own model.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting.
So,
Also
and
about the farmer, about the Hirenbhai, about the farmer. How did you get associated? How do you win a
right.
trust of a
So the
farmer?
first thing, naturally, you have to keep traveling untired efforts. Second, you have to tie up with the local system, like you tie up with best progressive farmer in that area. You tie up with the best agro input agency in that area. You tie up with the sarpanch. You do meet APMC guys in local area. You explain them about your process, about your intention, about your process of how you will uplift that area. Okay. So then you call for a gathering of farmers. You explain them about your intent of business. You explain them how you buy material versus other local players. You convince them about your payment systems. Right? You educate them that how your agronomist team will support them in reducing the resources they use for their farm. So there are multiple factors which has helped us, and we keep improving every day as we speak on these parameters, and that's why your farmer network is expanding.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you, Hirenbhai. Hirenbhai, now, just the last couple of things. What is a message that you would want to leave for a lot of these budding entrepreneurs that are putting time and effort in building the enterprise? What's the way forward? What should they do? What should they avoid? What is your learning that you want to give back to them in the next couple of minutes before we conclude with you, please?
I think my experience is temperament. First thing,
Okay.
you need to have very stable temperament. You don't need to get affected by what's happening. You may be cheated by many people. You may be dejected by people. Your best efforts may not work, and still you maintain your cool. Some people will not perform. Some people will lie, and you keep your cool, and you explain them honestly, straightforward way. This is right. This is wrong. This is how we can do together. This is how we will grow together. This is not me. This is we. I think this is temperament is the first thing which I. Second, I think as I keep saying, learning every day. You prepare a note. Maybe every week you prepare a note. What you learn, and you try to implement that learning. Not repeat your mistakes, because when you document your learning, you will document your mistakes also. Ensure that you don't repeat mistakes. And I think over the years, what has worked, one single thing for me is relationship. So if you keep building good relations, if you keep meeting good people, and if you stay in touch with them, some or the other way, that relationship can only drive everything at your organization.
And Hirenbhai, you said patience, and you mentioned that a lot of gurus that you follow. So this is an incubation center. How important are mentors for success of startup companies? How important is mentorship for a startup company?
Very, very, very important. I think it gives a 360-degree perspective, because when you have a goal or a vision, when you have a dream, and when you're fighting every day, and when you are trying to implement multiple things every day, sometimes you lose out on big things, sometimes you lose out on small things, and these big things and small things both affect your sustainability or your growth. But when you take out a time, maybe twice a week, maybe twice a month, and meet these people, and talk to them, they make you realize some of your errors. They make you realize some of the opportunities you are not focusing on. So I think these gurus and mentors play a very vital role, because see, there is one is, okay, you go through the entire cycle, you reinvent the wheel, you learn by yourself your mistakes. The second is, these gurus teach you through their learning or others learning, and you learn from others mistakes, and you try and adopt the best standards, best practices, and then you simplify, and you create a smooth flow of information and systems in your organization. and encounter with the new challenges and new ideas, and not the same typical old mistakes which others would have already done. So it's time saving. I think having mentors and right gurus help a lot.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Hiren Bhai. It was wonderful hearing you.